It's crazy to think how much Mega Man X has changed in the last half-decade. I bring this up because today we're talking about Mega Man X8, a game that released for the PlayStation 2 back in the mid-2000s, a time when Mega Man was on a clear path of diminishing returns. As a result, X8 was a game many didn't play, not like X3 where it's super expensive, but in that it was a game you'd have to go out of your way to find online as not that many copies of it were sold. So it's not particularly common at retro game shops these days. I'd say this gave X8 a niche appeal as one of the most underrated and best Mega Man X games. It also helped that the game was much better than what the X series had put out in its most recent entries at that point. I mean, following up upon Mega Man X7, how could it possibly get worse, or not look good by comparison at least? But you can watch last week's video to get all caught up on why Mega Man X7 is one of the worst games I've ever played. Anyway, all this has changed for X8 because the Mega Man X Legacy Collection released in 2018 on the, at the time, modern platforms. When a niche game gets given that kind of spotlight, sometimes the shine wears off, but it seems like X8 has still maintained a relatively positive reputation amongst Mega Man fans, even with its new audience. Mega Man X8 is a weird one for me because I almost never play this game. It's been made pretty clear in the past videos that Mega Man X1, X2, X3, and X4 are four of my favorite games of all time, so I'm naturally inclined to revisit those. But even X5, X6, and X7 are games that I've played many times, and while X8 is also a game I've played quite a bit in the last 7 years since I got it, it's the one of the 8 that I'd say I've gone back to the least, and therefore whenever I do play it again, I'm always interested to see how I'm going to feel about it because my opinion isn't really set in stone. I'm open to seeing Mega Man X8 in a new light. I know I gave the game a more or less negative review 5 years ago, however, much like the game itself, I don't really remember that video much, and believe you me, I'm not in a rush to look back at it. All I remember is that I was ready to be done talking about X, and X8 got the short end of the stick compared to the others. And you know what they say about those who don't learn from history, they mega merge with it. But I'm getting off topic, let's just put all that in the past and just talk about how I felt playing Mega Man X8 for this video for the first time in a long time. But before we dive into that, many of you had noticed that I opened up a merch store on my channel with CrowdMade. I'm sure you all have been in the situation where you're walking down the street and thinking to yourself, man, my shirt could really use Jay's Reviews' logo on the front and back. It happens, I know. But before now, no one has ever had any way to solve this problem. With our shirt, hoodie, hat, and beanie designs, you never have to worry about this issue ever again. So check it out. I think the designs are good and we have more stuff coming in the future. You can find it right below the video. Let's get back to talking about Mega Man X8. When crafting a sequel to Mega Man X7, the designers have many issues to consider. Chief among them, is X8 going to be a 3D game? A vast majority of the problems with X7 came from its 3D sections. Now, I don't think the flaws of X7 were because it was a 3D game. I instead think that the game just didn't have the time or budget to really consider how the mechanics of Mega Man X could be properly adapted into the 3D space. Needless to say, it was entirely possible to improve upon what was done in X7, but X8 instead opted to use 3D as a visual direction like Inafune said they should, and kept the gameplay 2D as a result, which already eliminates the majority of X7's problems from X8 right at the start. However, I do think it's worth mentioning now that X8 still does improve upon the things that X7 could really benefit from, even if they decided to scrap the 3D aspect of that game. In the later X games, the unlockables were starting to get really convoluted, which stemmed from the fact that in X5 you could switch from being X to 0 from stage to stage, and the life-ups that one character got would not go to the other. X6 featured rescuable Reploids that would hold life-ups with them that would, again, only go to the character you were at that time, with no way to distinguish them from Reploids who didn't, alongside having the same heart tank system from X5. X7 doing both of these undesirable things from X5 and X6 while including a third playable character into the mix. The games were in need of some serious streamlining. With two available solutions to the devs. You could do what the X5 and X6 fan mod projects did and just simplify it so that the stuff you found would work for both characters, or you could do what X8 ended up doing, which was taking the individual character upgrade idea and overhauling it into something much simpler. In X8, defeated enemies drop these things called chips. Blue ones being worth 1, yellow are worth 5, red are worth 50, and purple are worth 500. Clearing a stage will nab you 3,000 of them as well. This fixed the problem in X7 where you never had to fight the enemies. X8 being 2D inherently gets rid of that problem, but they made combat something you'd want to do now because you get chips for it, encouraging you to get higher hit combos in these combat rooms to get more chips. In between stages you can visit the Maverick Hunter lab where you can spend these chips on upgrades. Gone are the days of finding heart tanks and sub-tanks in stages. Instead, you use the chips you earned out in the field to buy these things. You can also purchase upgrades for each character individually, such as life-ups for X, Zero, and Axel, decreased weapon energy consumption for X, new weapons and combos for Zero, and the list goes on. If you simply prefer one character over the others, you can intentionally put everything you got into that character while tracking their progress, since the shop screen will show you the percentage of upgrades you've bought for each character. I just let the cat out of the bag that the playable roster from X7 is still intact in X8. The partner mechanic from that game is also still present in this one, with some quality additions to make it a more fleshed out game element. In X7, you just swapped to the other character whenever you needed, and there wasn't anything wrong with that, but it's not super intricate either. In X8, switching characters is more strategic because of the fact that taking damage will turn that portion of your health bar red, and by switching to the other character, the inactive character will begin to heal the damage he lost a moment ago. With this, you have to weigh your options in the moment. Maybe you're taking a lot of damage as X, but think he'd be a better fit for this enemy than Zero, who's on your team in this level. You could either risk losing all that health or just switch to Zero and give him a shot. It's a good idea, and it's a decision you make in basically every stage. They also add some function to the partner mechanic by allowing you to rescue your current playable character from being caught by switching to the other one. Lastly, this gauge next to your health bar allows you to do combo attacks with your teammate when filled. This is also nothing special, it's just a screen nuke, but it's satisfying to use as the last hit on a boss fight, as both characters will then pose in the victory screen afterwards. Nothing changes depending on which combo of characters you have as well, so that's a bit weak, but it still comes in handy. The team-up mechanic isn't to the level of something like Sonic Advance 3, but I don't think it really needed to be. The designers of X8 put effort into making a more involved part of the game, an improvement upon X7 in an area where that game didn't really falter anyway, so I say, hats off for that. X7 had the worst handling in the X series, but by contrast, Mega Man X8 is what I consider the best feeling controls in the entire series. The X games have more or less played the same since the very first entry, but there were some small differences. I mentioned how X4 and thus X5 and X6 have more recovery frames in your dash compared to X1 to X3 in the X4 review, so dash jumping rapidly became the best way to gain speed on PS1 compared to the earlier games where rapidly dashing was all it took. My point is, they have some changes to the handling every now and again, even if the controls were the same. X8 just feels really smooth to play, from rapidly mashing the dash button to wall jumping. The in-game animations just look and feel really smooth, which makes X8 a game where playing as its three characters is inherently fun because they feel good to play as. In terms of the actual controls, I might as well mention a few things I didn't get the chance to in the last couple of videos. For one, X5 changed the button mapping a bit. You can fully customize the buttons in that game like you could in every X game, but starting with X5, the triangle button uses your special weapons when they're equipped, when square still fires the X Buster. In X4, it was the other way around, and in the SNES games you couldn't do both at the same time. Despite it being a change from the norm Mega Man had established, I think the special weapons and the triangle button is pretty comfortable, which remained consistent in X6, X7, and X8. Although, since I'm on the subject, I might as well mention that I don't find the special weapons for X and Axel particularly useful in this game, amongst the sea of other combat options the player has in X8. Even Zero's techniques in this game went largely unused by me, aside from the mid-air spin. In X7, the air dash, an ability X first unlocked in Mega Man X2, became a fully integrated part of each character's move pool at default. Another positive change, as X still had to re-unlock the air dash in X3 and X4, and then could be left without it in X5 and X6, which really reared its ugly head in the penultimate stage of X6. Point being, the air dash is still there at default in X8, which is good. X5 gave X and Zero the ability to crouch, which came back in X6 and X7, but has been dropped in X8. The rope hanging mechanic was also dropped in X7. Crouching being gone is fine by me. I thought the mechanic had some good uses in X5, but by X7, the applications are becoming largely predictable, so X8 getting rid of it makes a lot of sense. One of the things X7 suffered from was Axel, its new playable character. Its selling point was basically a weaker X, someone who the players had to unlock to obscure that fact. In X8, all three hunters are properly distinguished from one another. X being the same as always, Zero being the same as X4 and onward, and Axel was changed in 2D to shoot in all directions, which is something that X cannot do. But X has the charge shot to do more damage, but Axel just has the superior range. Axel's copy shot is still in X8 and it was massively improved since you no longer need to charge it up and it does way more damage to boot, so you won't be standing around blasting enemies for an eternity like in X7. However, when playing X8, it is pretty clear to me that the copy shot for Axel just doesn't work. Mechanically, X8 improves on how it functions compared to X7, but the idea of turning into enemies and playing as them was just never fun in either game, as Axel himself has better defenses and reflexes. It's always a downgrade, so I only ever use it to gain items that require it. But having said that, the three hunters feel really balanced with one another. Axel being able to use his glide to traverse spike rooms easier, Zero having his double jump for extra height but a reduced dash length to compensate, and X's charge shots being really powerful against enemies and bosses. Not to keep beating the dead horse of X7, but it's honestly surprising how much X8 improves on from that game despite not really playing the same. Another example was how X7 made Aelia her most boring and lifeless with mundane tutorial dialogue in every stage. Now, the navigator system in X8 still doesn't yield super interesting dialogue and conversations, but they thought of a way to make in-stage guidance more useful in X8. The game introduces two new characters, Palette and Lair, and at the start of each stage you choose if you want Aelia, Palette, or Lair to help you through the stages, or if you aren't interested in help you can just opt out and not deal with the hand-holding. Each one of these three navigators has a personality and a different relationship with the three playable Maverick Hunters, interacting with them throughout the campaign. But as for the effect this has in the gameplay, each navigator helps you in a different way. Aelia being useful for general guidance like she has been in the previous games, Lair being knowledgeable about enemies and boss patterns, and Palette giving you a hand with hidden item locations, not outright saying how to get them, but alerting you that something's in your current location. And when I was trying to unlock everything, I thought Palette was pretty useful in giving me hints on where to stop and look around. X8 in particular is a game where it's super useful. To preface that discussion, I guess it's worth going over what items are in X8, since the 2 sub-tanks and 1 weapon energy tank are things you purchase in the shop now. Thankfully, they took this opportunity to reassess the upgrades and got rid of the EX tank, total dead weight of an upgrade in the past 3 games. As for what is here, X8 sees you collecting 8 Dr. Light capsules like X5 and X6, but they do a new twist with it. The games I just listed both had 2 completely different sets of armor for the player to unlock. Here, Dr. Light gives X the neutral armor, which doesn't have any features, but you must collect the 4 pieces of the Hermes and the Icarus armor to equip them on top of the neutral armor. When you find these pieces, you can mix and match the parts you like the best. All around, I was a bigger fan of the Icarus armor as it was geared towards attack power, like each buster shot being a mini charge shot and this big laser as a full charge blast, or how the foot parts make you jump really high. I think the Hermes armor, which is geared towards mobility, has useful parts. In fact, I even started using the head parts for it over the Icarus head parts since it lets you charge your shots faster, but as I was saying, it has useful upgrades like the foot parts, which increases your speed and allows you to dash through enemies, but I didn't think these bonuses outweighed the pros the powerful Icarus armor granted you. But with 8 light capsules to hunt down, it only brings us to the conversation of Mega Man X8's extraordinarily convoluted item game. X8 makes what could have been a simple 100% campaign into something really tedious by making everything take numerous steps to get. The stages are littered with rare metals, and these unlock things you can buy in the shop, like extra weapons for Zero or full sub-tanks for your characters. With Palette's help, physically finding upgrade locations isn't super frustrating, it's getting to them that I don't like. For example, in Burn Rooster's stage, you need this hammer weapon Zero can get, so first you have to find the rare metal which allows you to buy it, but then the hammer wasn't breaking the floor like it was supposed to, so I had to leave the stage and learn that only by defeating Gravity Antonian will I get the move needed to break the ground better than I was already doing before, I guess, which reveals the location of the hidden rare metal. Here's another delightful example. In Dark Mantis' stage, a rare metal is hidden at the end of this path with these platforms you need to jump up to. However, the level has a gimmick where it's all dark, hence the name. But if you use Axel's copy shot, turn into the enemy, jump into this room, and use the electricity weapon from Gigabolt Manowar, you then activate the generator that turns the lights on. The only way to make these platforms appear is if you do this. Lots of stuff in X8 feel like you wouldn't know how to do it without some kind of a hint. Like how in Burn Rooster's level, an enemy from the end of the stage is required to be copied as Axel so you can go back to the beginning and use it to get into a small hole in the wall. Now, placing the copied Reploid right next to the problem would be a bit lame. I'm just saying that hoping the player notices that this enemy you blow up in 2 seconds can become small enough to get through this gap later in the stage is also a reach at the same time. But while I'm talking about this level, it has 2 of the most obnoxious rare metals in the game, where you need to carry this right armor far enough to get to this part where you need to quickly get out of the right armor, hit this switch which lowers this platform, get back in the right armor and get on the platform in the span of a few seconds, or else your right armor will fall to the ground below because the switch is right above a conveyor belt. The task isn't impossible, but the act of starting the stage again takes an eternity because you have to sit through the results screen and get back to the stage select before just getting the chance to start over from square one. But once you get that rare metal, which took me around 30 minutes in my first run for this video, you then need to keep the armor around till this point in the end of the level and just hope you have the prickle barrier which allows you to get on this elevator which takes you to the last rare metal. Now, there are other ways of doing this, but what I just said is the simplest. But simply getting these things isn't even the most tedious part about it. Several stages will have rare metals hidden in the ground, and the only way to get them is by using a charged crystal wall with X, which first requires you having either the arm parts for the Hermes or the Icarus armor and having beaten Earthrock Trilobite stage. Making X the only character who can get these rare metals makes the game even more tedious to complete because now he needs to be in your party in basically every stage to minimize the stage revisits. Let's go back to the Dark Mantis example. At this generator room, you'll need to be X to dig out the rare metal, but you need to be Axel in order to get into the room at all, but Zero's double jump is how you reach the metal I just discussed before. unless you get the armor part for X that increases your jump height. Hope you knew that going into the stage. Optic Sunflower's level involves you doing these ranked challenges, and you get a rare medal for getting a perfect score on all of them. However, you also get a rare medal for only perfecting most of them, meaning you have to play the same stage a minimum of 2 times, when the infinitely more logical solution is to spawn both unlockable medals for a perfect run. But the way the designers went about it served to artificially lengthen the game by just a few more minutes. This issue is made even worse since Zero and Axel still cannot collect Dr. Light capsules on X's behalf like in X7. I don't get that because it was something X5 and X6 already had, so why make it more complicated from there? In X7 it was just kind of annoying, but with a cluttered item game like X8's it becomes aggravating because, again, look at Burn Rooster's stage. To fully complete this level, you need Axel and the copy shot to reach this rare medal, you need Zero's hammer and special move from having defeated Gravity Antonian, and you need X in order to nab this Dr. Light capsule. So like it or not, you're replaying this stage to get everything, which might beg the question, what's so bad about that? The level design in X8 is really where the game falls apart for me. It makes me sad because whenever I go back to X8, I'm reminded of just how many things this game does that I like. The shop, the navigators, the controls, the character balance, all good stuff. A somewhat obtuse item game can be worked around into something fun if you wanted to put that work in, but when I find the levels just fundamentally not fun to play, you run into a serious problem with the game's replayability. If I were to sum up what's wrong with these levels, it would simply be gimmicks. A level having a theme is certainly not a problem. Several stages in X series history have had a defining gimmick, so to explain how X8 fails, I want to look at the case where the game gets it right. One of the best levels in X8 is Dark Mantis' stage. Here the lights are out like I've said, and you have to sneak around the spotlights in order to not get caught. If you do, guards come running and you have to take them out. But skillful play allows you to avoid the spotlights and set enemies while also knowing the level well enough to get through it quickly. That's not some mind-blowing level design, it's just a good stage with a memorable central mechanic. The same goes for Bamboo Pandemonium stage, where you have to try to keep the right armor intact for the whole level and get different routes to explore depending on whether or not you succeed at doing that. But then we get the other levels of X8 where the game gets extremely dull. For example, Earthrock Trilobite. Every run of this stage involves a long chase with a mechanaloid, and after a certain point you chase him back to the starting position. It's fine in the first run, but after playing the stage again and again and again, it loses all luster and becomes really boring as it's an auto-scroller, something X8 is very fond of. I think Burn Rooster is the worst level in the game, as it begins with an auto-scroller where the player must climb down this room of platforms and it just is really slow, and on repeat visits it's just not fun to play the same slow segment of gameplay again, and like I said, to 100% the game, you gotta come here at least twice. The main segment of gameplay in this stage is broken up by these combat rooms, which I had reasons for enjoying before, but when you play the same stages again and again, it loses that luster and becomes very repetitive. Across my multiple runs of this game for the video, I think I had to sit through this auto-scroller section over 10 times, whether that be for backtracks or because I got a game over and had to start the stage again. X8 makes your lives worth a lot more than, I'd say, any previous X game by capping them at 5, which is one of the biggest complaints I made towards the game in the original video from 5 years ago. However, this didn't really impact me too much this time. It only came up when I got a game over on Burn Rooster, which meant I had to replay the auto-scroller for the gazillionth time. Even if a level gimmick isn't inherently boring like an auto-scroller, I still don't want to play Optic Sunflower again, you know? It's these challenges that Zero's lance easily tears apart that are kind of a hassle otherwise. At least you can fight Cutman from Mega Man 1 for a perfect performance. That was a neat Easter egg. Otherwise, it's not fun Mega Man X platforming, it's just a gimmicky stage. Same goes for repeatedly flipping Gravity and Gravity Antonian stage. It's neat for a few rooms, but isn't that fun to replay, which you will definitely have to do thanks to this room of spikes. I died so many times here from being in a position where I can't escape, and every time I died, I got thrown back a few rooms to repeat the same puzzles over and over. If you pick this stage third, then you at least face Vile here instead of the spike room, but the odds are that you will be doing this instead of Vile because most players just won't know that, which I didn't think of in my first run for this video. X8 is just paced really slow, from the numerous auto-scrollers, the frustrating ride chaser segments. Special shout out to Avalanche Yeti. This slog goes on for 5 minutes. Also, love how you need to be 0 to reach X's armor upgrade here, something I learned the hard way on my last run where I happened to try using X and Axel for once. But as I was saying, the game is also slow-paced in its boss fights, where the bosses are all given these really lengthy invincibility frames, which could be a good measure to make sure the player can't just wail on the bosses with their 2 playable characters. But the Mega Man Zero method of just making the health bar longer to account for high damage is preferable to just making the fights last longer. But at least the bosses have interesting designs and concepts, I'll give it that. The art design in this game is quite neat, but visually speaking, The game does not hold up. As I have said, I like playing these old PS2 games on an actual PS2, and here you see that X8 does not look appealing. Technically speaking, it's one of the few PS2 games to run at a 480p resolution, but it's also one of those PS2 games where you can't just turn that on in the menu. You have to hold triangle and X when the PS2 logo comes up, and I've always found that really janky. Even with the game being in 480p, you can clearly see the background and foreground assets that look like they belong in Ocarina of Time, an N64 game from 6 years earlier. Look how pixelated these background trees are at the beginning of the game. And the game keeps that up for the remainder of its run, as its areas are all very dull in terms of color palette and location, but then just have a very rough appearance as well. With the kind of performance this game has, you'd think the visuals would be a lot more high fidelity, but that is also not the case. It's a shame because X8 has this revamped art style for the X series, and I think it looks really slick and modern, showing how Reploid bodies are becoming slimmer with time, transitioning the art design from the older X games to the Zero games where the Reploid bodies look no different than the humans do. However, in X8, while the animations are greatly improved over X7, I'd say the models are just as lifeless and fugly, making it so that the new art direction is harder to appreciate. 480p also introduces some real jank to the game, like how it consistently put the game image in the top left corner of the screen. I don't know why this is happening. It's only X8 where I've seen this happen, but it's supposed to be in the center. Although speaking of things not being where they're supposed to be, X8's 480p mode feeling like an afterthought is no more evident than it is with the pre-rendered cutscenes. These are cut off on the left because the scene's been shifted beyond the boundaries of the screen. Can't say I know why that happened. Even the HUD and UI just look really bad in X8. The text looks really off, the lines in the health bar are super inconsistent in size and spacing. The game just looks ugly. That's my point. This being a rare case where the remaster fixes these problems. If we're talking about HUD scaling and such, just look at the SNES and PS1 X games in the very same collection. They completely screwed it up. But X8 fixes it from the mess it was on PS2. With faster loading screens and such, this is easily the best version of X8 to play, just like X7. I still don't think X8 looks very good, but it's at least at its best in XLC. X8's cutscenes are still in the same kind of tier as X7, although they tried to do a little more interesting stuff with the camera work, but I figured I'd take this moment to say that I don't have a problem with this visual novel story presentation. I was just saying that X7 looked incredibly low budget, and X8 is much the same. For console releases, they just don't feel up to snuff, you know? But X8 does feature much improved voice acting compared to any of the games prior to this. I'm not going to say that the voice acting in X8 is super amazing, but by and large, the casting works for the characters, especially X, sounding sensitive but determined.
He shouldn't blame himself. The problem's already been solved anyway. It seems Sigma may be involved in this new threat as well. Zero wants to take care of him for good this time. So do I.
Sometimes the line delivery in this game can just be weird and off, but like I said, it's entirely passable. Same goes for the music, still not super high on it, but I think it's okay. Now, the story in X8 is weird for me because I always forget what's even going on in this game. Basically, Axel in X7 was this super innovative Reploid with the copy chip, and by X8, a whole new generation of Reploids has been produced with this ability, and they have the ability to go Maverick at will. But what I found confusing was that, did they actually go Maverick at will, or were they just evil? I mean, they say they aren't Mavericks in the cutscenes, which I guess a Maverick wouldn't say that he is one, but it's just kinda weird to me. The New Age Reploids are led by a character called Lumine, who's captured by Sigma and Vile at the beginning of the game. And this actually led to the best plot element in the game where you face off against Sigma at the end, only for it to be revealed that Lumine was the one behind everything and Sigma was not the true villain of X8, even though you were led to believe he was like all the other games. I don't find Lumine a particularly interesting character, but they used the repetitive X-series storytelling as a way to subvert your expectations at the end, which deserves credit. I also like how they use continuity in X8. Like Zero really wanted to take Sigma out because of his trying to use Zero in X5 to spread the Maverick virus. It just makes things a little more personal when this sort of stuff has an impact on the characters. And I liked the characters bouncing off one another in the cutscenes, especially Vile, who's back after his defeat in X3, now going full shameless Boba Fett. But overall, I just didn't vibe with the story in this game. I'm not going to hold it against the game, I'm just saying that X8 is different for me because of the fact that I didn't find the story that interesting, so therefore I don't have much to say on it. If you're into the symbolic analysis of storytelling, X8 has some meat on its bones with the whole thing going for a Tower of Babel reference and other religious references, but I just talk about the characters and such, and so yeah, I didn't really vibe with the story like I said. Which goes for the entire finale of X8 as well. There are 3 final stages in this game and I have very little commentary to add on it. The Jacob elevator stage is just such a perfect example of an X8 level. You ride this elevator for several minutes and fight enemies and that's literally it. By my 4th playthrough, I was seriously dreading playing this part, but I got through it to be met with the boss rush stage. Thankfully, the boss rush and final boss are 2 separate stages again, but I don't like this segment inherently. X8's bosses have lengthy iframes, as I mentioned earlier, so doing that in a big sequence is just boring, as I wreck them all with their weaknesses. The final level was fun. It's littered with spikes, and so I can't help but feel pretty based when I effortlessly jump between them. The final battle with Sigma's pretty easy, but I think that's put to good use in this game. The final Sigma design in this goes to show how far his character has fallen. He's back yet again, but is so broken that he doesn't even have skin. He's just a robotic frame now. A logical follow-up from X6's zombie-like Sigma, ignoring X7's Sigma since everything was a mess there, even the design. I think the story is trying to show that bringing a Reploid back from the dead this many times is just starting to have diminishing returns, with it being implied that this is the final time X and Zero will fight Sigma. But hey, X9 might come out someday and have him come out of nowhere like usual. Who knows? The true final battle is against Lumine, which is a cool boss in that he uses attacks from the other bosses with the same weaknesses applying. But the second phase has this bullshit thing where if the darkness envelops the screen at the end, you just die. And if that happens to be your last retry chip, guess you have to do the entire stage again. I repeat, thank goodness the boss rush was a separate stage. In the ending, Axel gets attacked by Lumine, leaving the audience wondering what was going to happen to him as we get this admittedly pretty cool cutscene between X and Zero.
Anyway, X. Even if we Reploids are destined to join the scrap heap when that evolutionary step does come about, we still have to fight, not only against Mavericks, but against our own destiny as well.
However, the X series' fondness for sequel baiting finally caught up to it with X8 because this game never got a sequel, so who knows at this point where they might go with the series' story going forward. It's all up in the air. Ending Mega Man X8. I guess I generally don't have that much to say about Mega Man X8. Every time I revisit it, I'm always met with that same sense of disappointment, and that I really want to love Mega Man X8, but I just don't. The shame of it is that this game gets so many things right. I spent the first half of the video focused on those things. But the game just flounders when it comes to the item game and its level design, but in a way that completely kills the replay value for me. Do I think X8's a bad game? Certainly not. It's just not for me, clearly. The fact that the game still has such a large fan base, even with it being widely available, speaks to the fact that the positives with this game work for many, and its varied, gimmicky stages clearly work for many people as well. I'm just not one of those people, as X8 leaves me feeling pretty empty when all is said and done. But I'm very glad this video exists to give me the chance to give X8 a proper look through, though. I mean, the first time around, there were so many mechanics in this game I just didn't understand, and so the video was super incomplete and incredibly cringe. Originally, I didn't know if I was going to spend time doing X5 through X8 again, because I wasn't sure if it was needed. With X1 through X3, I got to fix the tone and presentation amongst a sea of other things, and with X4, the terrible audio quality was fixed, in addition to the obvious cleaner footage and all that good shit. After having done re-reviews on X5 through X8, I must say I'm pretty pleased. Was it super needed to go through X5 or X7 again? Maybe not. Maybe the original has all the same points, but I had a lot of fun going back to these games and giving my adult perspectives on them, removed from all that 10th grade cringe from 2017. X6 and X7 especially were 2 videos where I had a lot of fun making them, and it seems people enjoyed the end results just as much. People seem to have an issue with extensive re-reviews since the audience doesn't mind the old version, which I entirely get, since many of the issues with, say, the 2016 X4 video will only bug me. But my thought process is that I feel like a completely different person from the one who reviewed these games years ago, and I want to be able to share that. I mean, I'm not planning on reviewing X3 every year, you know? It's just a great way to look back after half a decade since the original videos. So with that said, I do plan on covering the other X games that I said I wasn't going to be covering again. Yeah, we're tackling the X spin-offs, which, yes, does include X Dive. I finally plan on giving that game a shot and seeing if I have anything to add to the subject. And so I can give more thoughts on the X series then. Kinda took the burden off of this video on X8, I must say. But in the meantime, there are some other things I'd like to cover, and I hope to see everyone stick around for those. To close the video, I will say the same thing I always do. Thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you next time.